several years ago. The solution we took was complete avoidance. Okay, we normally don't have a need for it, and we totally eliminated any use of names. Certainly, absolutely nothing will be collected that has anything to do with the public. But then we started to hit issues with dealing with our spotters, which are volunteers that report weather, and our own people, and can we actually have contact lists? But the fundamental solution has just been avoiding it. Anywhere that any information that may conceivably have any privacy impact is ruthlessly eliminated, which then put us into a mission situation. Our director wants us to focus on providing impact-based forecasts. But we don't have any direct way of figuring out who's actually in the public is using our forecast information, since we don't keep track of that. So I mean, we get around this now by hiring sociologists, hiring firms that do web analytics, to do the external studying that we're afraid to do internally. So I just thought this is an interesting perspective of how one agency that does eliminate privacy concerns.
So I guess, just to respond to that comment, as a CPO, my job is risk mitigation, not risk elimination. And my agency has PII on 50 to 100 million people at any given time. My job as CPO is to work with business owners in the IT group to allow us, and in fact enable my agency to efficiently and effectively do what the taxpayers want us to do, while minimizing risk to the extent possible to individual information. My job as a CPO then is not to say no, is not to say avoid the topic, but is to address it head on, to work with the stakeholders, to reduce risk, and to make difficult decisions. And if I do it that way, and if people trust me and know that I'm a partner, then people are going to come to me and we'll work together. We can't stop collecting data. We can't stop collecting data about people. My agency lives and breathes data, which is why you need a good CPO, a good CISO, and a good CIO who work together to address the issues. But the answer is not to stop collecting data.
Yeah, and let me echo Mark on that point. The issue is, well, there's two things that I want to respond to quickly in your thing. One is, the issue is you got to collect what you need to collect to do your business. And if part of doing your business, is to measure the impact on, people and businesses and commerce generally, then you got to collect what you need to collect, but you have to do it smartly. Whether that's by using sociologists and things like that is, one way to do it. The other issue is, in my view, as a privacy officer and as a risk mitigator, and that just by contracting out and using grants and things like that, that does not eliminate your risk. It contracts your risk to someone else, but ultimately at the end of the day, if there's a major incident, a major problem with the structure of that relationship, it's going to come right back home, Right, and that may be the right way to approach and mitigate the risk, but the issue being is that, as we've all seen in government, we own our problems even if we try to push them off onto contractors. They still belong to us. No one in the public cares. It's a matter of trust. It's what our mission is. We're here to serve the public. So if we try to push our problems out there, nobody buys it. Congress doesn't buy it. The public doesn't buy it. The media doesn't buy it, and they shouldn't, because it's what our mission is to do what, we've been charged with certain things by Congress. We're supposed to do those missions. And the idea to you need to be able to own those, whether the ultimate decision you make as a team is, we should do this through sociologists because they can do different work than we can. They may have that expertise. But, it's important to keep that in mind, that going to a model where there's lots of contracting and grants and things like that does not eliminate that.
Great, thank you.
Just one point. One of my favorite pastimes is reading GAO audits and IG audits, not only from my agency, from other agencies. And I have to tell you, it's a consistent story. Organizations had an issue. The message was clearly, when you read the fine print, they avoided it. Like it never happened. There's no potential risk, no privacy office. Or at least if they had one, they didn't have authority and resources. And it's the conclusion is followed by a series of recommendations after those type assessments versus organization, and there are a few reports that indicates the organization accepted risk almost to the point of zero tolerance, and they could demonstrate their due diligence. They had documentation. They had privacy impact assessments. They had training, mandatory training for all employees. And I can tell you, regardless of where you're at, for anyone in your organization to say you've never had a PII breach, whether it's paper-based, electronic, you need to be very concerned, because I'm telling you, you've probably had several. You just haven't realized it. And what's important is somebody in the organization commands the knowledge, they understand this business called privacy, they can articulate it, and when necessary, demonstrate to the third party that's coming in to assess a major incident that, in fact, the organization did take privacy very seriously.
Great. I did just get the 15-minute mark, so we have a few more questions. So this is great dialogue, but if we can keep the answers a little more terse, I want to make sure there's a few more important points I want to hit. You were talking about assessments, Jerry, and Mark, I have a question for you. Privacy impact assessments are something that hopefully all of you in the audience are aware of. They're an important part of this privacy initiative that we're talking about here. However, I think in some of my discussions, some folks view it as a paper exercise and more of a compliance issue than an actual useful exercise. So I'm wondering, you know, if you could share what are your thoughts on that, what are the CISO's roles, and help the audience maybe understand why this is valuable.
Great. Yeah, it's a real concern. So the privacy impact assessment, which is required by the Government Act, is an incredibly useful tool. It ties back to the concept of privacy by design. And when it's done effectively, it actually really does serve to mitigate risk. My concern is I've looked at many websites of government agencies, and their PIAs are checklists, or the questions don't make any sense. And then all of a sudden it's checked off, the PIA is done, we're good for our FSMA report, and you move on. And that is not an effective way to mitigate risk. Our PIAs are an in-depth analysis at the beginning of a procurement or acquisition or development or upgrade to a technology, and we really get into the details working together, and we ask the difficult questions. So just one example, and I know you said be short, but I'm a lawyer. So, but you know, so we outsource a database. The PIA can't be a checklist, and so we've gone through element by element. What are you collecting? Why are you doing it? And it can't be, if the answer in a PIA is one sentence, law enforcement, that does not help me if you're collecting 40 different data elements on 10 different categories of people. That is not going to be a sufficient answer. And then we're going to talk about the controls. And at the end of the day, if you've done your PIA well, you're going to have an amazing product or technology that will address things from masking data elements, encryption at rest, encryption in transit, whether you have extracts or not, the kinds of authentication, role-based access controls, logging, and so forth. So I can't emphasize enough the role of the PIA. It's critical, and if it's only a paper exercise at your organization for your FSMA report, then you're really losing an opportunity to address and mitigate risk.
If I could just add, that privacy impact assessment for me is evidence. It's documentation. It demonstrates due diligence. And there's no yes or no questions with the exception of the first module of the PIA. And I'm essentially asking the programs, will they collect PI? I mean, we do have IT systems at the Energy Department where there is no personal information. They're doing mathematical computation at the laboratories to introduce any material such as personal information would call into question the accuracy of their research. So if they answer no to the threshold questions, that's the end of it. They go to the signature page, and the system owner certifies that the system will have no personal information. If they answer yes to those threshold questions, any of them, then they go into the full PIA module. First question I ask, what's the authority to collect, especially Social Security numbers? What is your authority? Is there consent?